Lunch break on day 33 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. We've been listening this morning to the questioning of Paul Gravett. It's the second day of questioning he's had. He was questioned back in, might have just taken a minute to start there. Day 33 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, we're listening to Paul Gravett give his second day of evidence. He gave evidence back in November where he talked about the role of Bob Lambert, the undercover police officer who he was in an ALF cell with in the 80s. This questioning's been more about HN1, covering Matt Rain, as well as Andy Coles, who was questioned before Christmas. I'm joined with Robin Lane, who gave evidence to the inquiry just before Christmas as well. Paul's been asked a lot about the setting up of London Boots Action Group, London Animal Aid, London Animal Rights Coalition, some things that you yourself were involved with. What do you make of his evidence so far today?
Paul, I've known Paul since the early 80s. He's a very well-respected, very committed campaigner for animal rights and animal liberation. I think it's difficult for him, in this situation. He's been asked lots of very, leading questions by the barrister. I think he's holding up pretty well, under the circumstances. This part of the questioning is less to do with Animal Liberation Front associated things, and it's more to do with legal campaigning groups such as we just heard from Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the style of the questioning from John Warrington, the barrister who's questioning Paul, is he goes to a lot of reports. We get a lot of reports. He goes after them one after the other before he starts asking any questions. And that means that we are kind of lost in huge amounts of detail around. We've heard quite a lot about the merging of Boots Action Group with London Animal Rights Coalition and other, just huge amounts of detail. But as you say, it's all focused very much on very legal campaigning. There was some questions about the use of funds and whether that was being passed on to the ALF supporters group or the ALF themselves. This is sort of like ground we've covered previously. There's quite a lot of questions really which covered stuff which I really felt had been covered before. There was a couple of things. Some of the things I mentioned in the morning break, which really irritated me about the reports. There was one which suggested that animal rights activists were throwing eggs at trucks that were transporting animals for live export, which is just nonsense. Plainly on the face of it, utter nonsense, and a real sign that the undercover police were inserting fiction into their reports. Was there anything really which stuck out to you from the reports that were just lies?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, of course. The undercover police want to make out that, for instance, when they mentioned London Animal Rights Coalition, I think it was probably Andy Coles saying that London Animal Rights Coalition London was largely unsuccessful. I think that is, as I said in my own evidence, that is absolute rubbish because it was. I wouldn't like to say that if without London Animal Rights Coalition, London Animal Action wouldn't have been founded. But what I would say is that we came in, I say we, that was myself, Andy Coles and Privacy, came in to coordinate the London, diverse London groups into one group under one umbrella, which then became subsequently London Animal Action. So to say that London Animal Rights Coalition London was unsuccessful is just stupid. And like Tom just said about the throwing the eggs, animal rights people, animal liberationists do not throw eggs, that come from industrialized battery farms at live export lorries. It's just ludicrous.
It's madness. It's something which we really see in these reports. We saw one earlier as well about, these two people had come into the group and we expect them to really take charge of the group over the next few months. And then the next report from a few weeks later, they've left the group because they fell out with everybody. There is this narrative that the police love to push on these reports that, essentially they've shut the group's changing now. They're all falling apart. They're all falling out with each other. And they haven't got anywhere. We've successfully stopped them from being effective, whilst at the same time, building up groups as being, this is a new danger, we need to concentrate our resources on them and so forth. And this is just this really fictional narrative they were trying to create.
I think what it is really, the undercover police at the beginning of the 90s were on dodgy ground because, the groups that they were reporting on were 99.99% legal campaigning. There were members of those groups who might have other ideas about, be supportive or even involved in Animal Liberation Front activity. But the groups themselves that they were infiltrating were legal groups, who campaigned legally. Now, I think this thing about this, I think the barrister was leading Paul down a very dodgy road, suggesting that, London Animal Action did donate to funds to the ALF, Animal Liberation Front Supporters Group. Oh, yeah, but then, there could be could the ALFSG could be donating, giving money to the Animal Liberation Front. But the thing is, I think, wasn't that to do with that benefit gig where Bob Lambert was involved? So, this could be agent provocateur stuff, And I think he was kind of leading Paul down this road, which put Paul in a very uncomfortable situation. And there was this insinuation, which I think was force,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's been a few intonations from John Warrington this morning. There was one where he was talking about the use of sending bricks by free post.
Costing £4 each.
Yeah. I mean, but the way that it was like kind of, he was almost suggesting like it was a slow delivery guided missile of a brick through the post. I mean, it was just come on.
It's ludicrous. I mean, who's going to go to the post office with a brick, wrapped up, and it's going to pay £4 to send it to? I mean, why would anyone do that? They could just make a phone call and send a taxi round. It's crazy.
Yeah. But certainly there is that sort of, when we look at the reports, and there's things about, using free post addresses, using free phone numbers, and all this sort of, this kind of activity is kind of dressed up as if it's somehow extreme.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, in my own evidence, they asked me about that, and I said, yeah, well, because at the time there wasn't that law of harassment, and we did indeed send lots of, probably about 100, in free post coupons to a vivisector down in South London, and also, other people have done similar things, But yeah, they're trying, like Tom says, they're trying to dress it up into something that it really wasn't,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we see it again with like mentions of home visits, perfectly legal at the time, now no longer legal. But when those reports were being done, this was legal political activity. And I mean, if that's being used as a justification, well, they need to change. Well, they did change the law, but it's very thin. I mean, it's very thin today. I mean, there have been times where we've been looking at the reports, and they seem, particularly with Bob Lambert, we now know that lots of those illegal activity that he's talking about was actually stuff that he was doing. But there's been a real shortage today of any kind of much in the way of illegal activity at all in any of the reports.
Yeah, I think there's just been a very brief mention of like I said earlier, the barrister trying to make out that LAA were inadvertently donating funds to Animal Liberation Front. But I don't really see how that could be possible anyway, because if Paul, for instance, was involved in diverting funds to Animal Liberation Front, he would put himself into a conspiracy with those Animal Liberation Front activists, which would be crazy and totally ridiculous and totally against what the group stood for,
And we heard some very detailed evidence before Christmas from, I think it was Callum, or is it Walter? I get them confused because these are pseudonyms, they're not real names of these people. But one of whom had been running the ALF supporters group and was, very clear that, it was the worst way. If you wanted to give money to the ALF, the worst way to do it was to give money to the ALF supporters group, because it was making a really big point of making, very clear transparency about where that money was going. It was going to prisoners. It was going to running the SG, doing the newsletter, doing all those kind of things, which lots of political activity, quite expensive, because they were giving quite a lot of money to support people, to visit people in prison, to directly support people in prison by sending them money themselves. The money was being accounted for. If you wanted to give money for direct action, please don't give it to the SG, because it's going to be demarcated for other things. And I mean, this idea that the two groups were like easily confused and conflated is just it doesn't bear any sort of any sort of interrogation, really. The only real sort of like heavy criminality we heard about today was coming from people who were working for the fur industry and butcher shops, one of whom threw a bucket of blood over Paul Gravett's head. Which the police, you apparently told them deserved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the 90s, myself and my wife, we went down to somewhere in South London. We were demonstrating outside a butcher shop, and the butcher came out with a meat cleaver and was threatening us with it. We were outside McDonald's one day. Some guy came up. He a fascist, I think he was. He threw all my leaflets on the pavement when I stood up. He's bashed me in the head with his fist. I mean, yeah, the violence comes from the from the animal abusers and the animal abuser supporters, with no sympathy from the police or proper action. I mean, surely, if an animal liberationist, threw a bucket of fake blood over the head of an animal abuser, they'd certainly be arrested. Didn't seem to work the other way.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a double standard, right? And it's a double standard we've got used to, really. And I think sometimes we kind of fail to call that out because we got so used to it. We're so used to the idea that the police are on the side of the abusers, they're on the side of wrongdoing so much that we just oh yeah, well of course, but we really need to call that. I mean, I think every opportunity we should always take to call that out.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not saying all police are bad. I'm not one of those people that would say that. Yeah, he is, but I don't say that. But at the end of the day, the police are agents of the state, and their job is to protect the vested interests of what they consider to be legal industries. We would say that they should be illegal industries. I mean, the mechanized industrial slaughter of animals should be a crime. Vivisection is another word for sadism. Should be a crime. The fur trade, absolutely abomination. And yet the police defend those industries, those corporations or whatever. Absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really good just at the end of the questioning. It was Paul kind of... he explained that, I think the question was, did you expect this? Or I can't remember what the exact question was, but he said, I expected the state to take an interest in the animal rights movement in the 1980s when it became a force, because to question speciesism is to question something which underpins society as it currently stands, and that, you become a threat to the order by challenging these things, which are the basis of all the abominations you just listed. I thought that was really powerful. Is there anything else you want to add about him?
About Paul, well, we're all there behind him, supporting him. I think he's doing well. Well done, Paul.
Yeah, he'll be back again this afternoon. I'm not sure how much longer they'll be questioned, but there is a bit more this afternoon. Then tomorrow we've got Denise Fuller, who will be giving evidence. Liz Fuller, I think she's listed as. I never know which right name to use. And then on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, we'll have HN1, cover name Matt Rayner, giving evidence. So it looks like it's going to be an interesting week.
A one-time good friend of mine, Matt Rayner. Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Any comments?
He owes me money, for the food, and so does Andy and the others. So just send it along in postal order, it'll be fine.
Invoices available on request.
Anyway, thanks, Tom. It's been great. Anyway, well done for all the work you're doing.
No worries. Thanks for joining us, Robin. Thanks for watching. We'll be back again this afternoon. I'll do another video in the break and at the end of the day this afternoon. Cheers for joining. See you all soon. Yeah.